Hi, and welcome to Teach Start, and today we're looking at how to diffuse a situation in the classroom. Now, I'm going to pick an example today that the teacher and a student are at a point where things aren't going well, that the student's upset with the teacher's upset with the student, and it's that situation that we're going to be talking about diffusing today. Now, the advice I'm going to give today is not revolutionary. It just works though, and it's something that all teachers should follow. So it's in any textbook, it will probably be the same advice, but it's something that I think I've obviously, in my experience, observed teachers not following this, and it never ends well. And I say to the teacher afterwards, right, this is how you do it next time. And the ones that follow that advice always find it a lot easier. So let's come up with an example. So a student has done something wrong, and the teacher has seen them do it wrong, and the student has said, no, I didn't do it, or it was someone else, or blah, 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 whatever. And it's ramping up. The student starts shouting, and the teacher starts shouting and going, yeah, I saw you do it, whatever. What do you do in that position? Now, that position is impossible for the teacher to win. They cannot win that argument. The students are way quicker, have a bulk behind them, probably friends in that classroom. Like it's 10 against 1 or whatever the situation may be. You're never going to win that argument with that student. What you could do is start ramping up the punishment and start saying, right, that's it. If you don't sit down, you're going to have a week of detention, whatever. You could start bumping up the sanctions, and then get the student even more annoyed and start shouting and start throwing things or whatever it is they do. What the advice is always is diffuse the situation. What diffuse means is just get rid of all of the tension or the anger or the hostility and just ramp it down. And the way of doing that is, well, there's multiple ways of doing it, but the way of doing it mainly is keeping calm. The student obviously is having issues, and their blood is boiling and they're getting hotter, and the adrenaline is pumping. But the only way of stopping that, because they don't make rational decisions when their adrenaline's pumping, they don't. It goes to the older end of the brain, the kind of caveman end of the brain. Fight or flight. Well, they're not going to fly, and so they're not making rational decisions in that position. So trying to talk to them on an intellectual level of, if you don't do this, this will happen, it seldom works. It sometimes does, but it very seldom does. And which students you can do that with. The best way of doing it is diffuse it. So keep calm. Okay, right, I understand that you don't agree with that. I want you to sit down and we'll talk about it at the end. Or I want you to go outside for a couple of minutes just to calm down, and we'll discuss it after that. And diffuse it. So if that student goes outside that classroom, they've got 2 minutes of feeling angry, but probably after a couple of minutes they start to calm down. And then what you do then is you go outside the classroom to go, right, okay, things got a bit out of hand there. I think we both got a bit tense with that. This is what I saw you doing, and I don't know what the context was, but this is what I saw. And the student then go, oh yeah, but actually it was someone else did something first and you didn't see that bit. And you start to have a discussion about it, and try and keep it concise, because I don't like teachers being outside the classroom for ages, and also try and stand in front of the window so you can see into the class. But I think that is an important discussion to have, because then that's a kind of, you're listening to the student and the student's listening to you, and you're much more likely to do that not in front of the class, and you're much more likely to do that after a little bit of time has passed for both you and the student to calm down. If you decide to keep the student in the room and talk about it at the end, then don't talk to that student anymore. Just carry on teaching. And if that student's effing and blinding, then for that moment you can ignore it. And when that student has calmed down, then perhaps you go over and you go, right, I want you just to stay behind at the end of the lesson, we'll discuss that. And then you walk over to someone else and you carry on going. The point is that you got student and you got teacher, and if they're going like this and they're getting angrier, it's never going to go anywhere. And all you're doing is getting that student into a position they're likely to do something stupid. And part of teaching is making sure students don't get into that position where they don't feel like they've got anywhere to go. Always give the students somewhere to go. Always give them a get out of jail free card at that moment. Obviously, the sanctions will come later, and that's absolutely fine and right and proper that the student doesn't get away with it. But you don't need to sanction them right then and there, and you don't need to ramp up the adrenaline even more and make them more and more upset at that moment. You can do that later, and actually most students, when you give them a sanction afterwards and you've explained it and they understand why and they understand what you've seen, and you only ever say what you've seen. You don't say this is what happened, because no teacher can fully evaluate what's happened in the classroom and what's led up to it. So you say, this is what I saw when everything's nice and calm, and you say, this is what I saw, and because you did this, this is what's going to happen next. And I find also when you're like this, that student, at the end of that lesson will go home and tell their parents that everything was awful, blah, blah, blah. But when you've diffused it, let some time go past, and then talk to that student when both of you are calm. Actually, I never get a phone call home from a parent, or when I ring home, they always say, yes, he or she did say that happened in the lesson today. They did say, though, that actually it was someone else, and you say, well, I didn't see that other person, but I've promised your child that I will look out for it and see if it happens next lesson. But I've wanted to resolve it today, so we have a nice fresh lesson next lesson. And that's the important thing as well. It's every lesson is new, and you reassure the student and you reassure the parent that yes, they can have sanction for what they did today, but don't worry, next lesson is absolutely fresh. So if there were extraneous variables, if there were things going on that I didn't pick up, I'm looking out for them now. You've told me about them, and I'm going to make sure that I look out for them in the next lesson. Because I'm not perfect. I'm a teacher, and this is maybe a conversation with the parent, but I'm not perfect. I will miss stuff, and it's up to your child to let me know that if I've missed anything, which they have today, and I'm going to look out for it now. I'm going to be on the lookout in case that student Y does the same thing again next lesson. And I think it's the conversations you can have when things are calm are endless. You can have any type of conversation you want. The conversations you have when things are like this are, well, you've got zero conversations that you can have that are constructive, that will diffuse that situation. So just always walk away first, or get the student to stand outside, either way. And some students will not stand outside, so okay, you stay in the classroom, but I'm just not going to communicate with you at the moment. You've got to make a call then, because if you've left that student alone and you decided to deal with it later on, and that student is still effing and blinding or still doing the behaviour that you've asked them not to, then that's where the rest of the school structure comes in. That's when you call someone to come and remove that student, because that student is not calming down. And I think that's a difficult judgment to make, is that student calming down, or are they getting more annoyed that you're not there with them? Because there are some students who, even though you're not doing this anymore, they can do it themselves and start getting wound up by their friends, or wound up by the situation even more. Or, are you ignoring me now? Why aren't you talking to me? And that becomes a different issue, because then the student is not calming them down, and assuming that you've asked them just to stand outside for a second so they can calm down. And be careful with your phrasing of words there, because a lot of students I work with absolutely don't mind me saying that, and know that they get red-headed sometimes. But some students, they might see that as kind of condescending, that it's not me being angry, it's the situation, whatever. So you might want to choose your words wisely with that. But the school systems are there for the students who just absolutely are not calming down and not being able to talk to rationally. And most schools have a system with detentions that you can come along and just kind of explain things with the student and say, at the end of the day, look, this is what's happened. And I think the restorative meetings that you have with them, which are always meetings, or always discussions you have with them outside of class, are really important, that you listen to them as well as you have what you have to say. Students, like us, don't like not being listened to. As a teacher, have a think to yourself, do you not like being not listened to? Say if you've noticed something wrong in the school and you say to your line manager, oh, hang on, we could do this slightly better. If the line manager goes, no, I'm not listening, I'm the line manager, I decide. Do you honestly say to me that you are okay with that? Because the students aren't. And I think we need to be thinking a little bit more about, well, we get annoyed at it, but the students shouldn't. They're students. No, they're very similar to us normally. I hope this has been a useful video, if not an interesting one, and I hope that you can apply this to your own teaching. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. We release videos every single weekday at 5 o'clock in the evening. Thank you.